And that gig was scoring what is now the most awarded film in history.
A big success as a film composer is very different than being like a big success as a pop star.
And I think that's cool. I mean, that we did that on Everything Everywhere All at Once. The original plan was actually to do that extensively.
Albums, especially in this day and age, so often are like packed into this tight space. Every song's gotta grip and hit and be the biggest thing, and
a lot of super engaging super quickly.
Yeah, like all the time, just like demanding so much of you. And whereas a great film like builds around a few key moments.
My first like break though as a composer was when
Son Lux, welcome to dopeYEAH, and we're here in the Radio Museum, which is a little bit unique to say the least. So
it's bananas, man. It's
initial thoughts?
Never seen anything like it.
Nothing remotely.
Never will. It's cool to see like the history of sound and technology.
Yeah, and also like the respect that people over the years have conferred on sound and the transmission of sound. You know, like you really get the sense that like this was something that was like special and magical and like deserving of care, and like, you know, like the way that it's framed and presented is so beautiful and so intricate and ornate, and like, yeah, it just kind of, it like reflects a certain value on
It's like
it.
a homage, you know,
Yeah.
to music. I've always thought this place is like a church to music, you know, from the beginning. And that's kind of like what, you know, you guys are always, I mean, I have to say, first and foremost, I'm a massive fan, and been listening to a lot of your music over the last week or so, and it's just absorbing myself in it. The more I absorb myself in it, the more I fall in love with it. And I had saying earlier on to you guys, I had a bizarre day. You know, I was on my way here this morning really early. I missed, last night the flight was cancelled, and so I had to go at like really early this morning before 4 o'clock, so I was tired, and my cat was very ill, and
oh no.
So I was a bit worried about him, and yeah, this like some sort of obstruction or something, and I got on the plane. I was really stressed about him, but I was listening to your music at the same time, so it was kind of woven into the narrative of my day, and like it was like the soundtrack of my day. And then it was great, you know. So I was kind of getting, you know, a little upset, just worrying about him. And then just as the plane was landing, my wife called me and just said, "Oh, he's fine. He's just shit everywhere." And it was like, and it was amazing. It was like, what a great start to the day. My cat is shit everywhere. And then I decided, because I was still tired, I'll go for a hike up here. There's a nature reserve up the road here. So I hiked up there and did a bit of wild swimming in the lake, and listening to your music on my phone, like by the side, having a joyous time. So it's kind of from the melancholy to the joy. So you're now written into the narrative of my life in one way. I'll never forget today. It's quite
I'm glad your
special.
cat's, it sounds like
I'm glad that it went to joy rather than
the other way around.
Well, so like getting back to the technology side of it, so, you know, you guys have always been really interested in pushing the envelope as far as sound is concerned and soundscape. And so as a kind of collective group, how do you delegate sort of tasks, or do you all do everything, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think more and more we all do everything. I think, you know, so Son Lux began as a solo project. And
your solo project.
Yeah, that's right. And when it came time for me to tour properly, which wasn't until I'd made like 3 records was I able to sort of click into a mode where I was trying to get out and actually perform the music. I knew that I wanted to find musicians that didn't operate with the limitations of a single instrument, or even a single way of thinking about music and creating music. It was really important to me that I found musicians that, and this was just for the sake of, this was just for the sake originally of just forming a live band.
Sure.
I knew I needed to find musicians who were like prismatic, you know, who came at music with such an open mind, even if they were skilled at a particular instrument, they were, they could. That wasn't the sole lens through which they saw music or could create it. And then when I found these guys, I recognized that immediately, that these guys had that in spades. And not only that, I feel like, I just saw such enormous potential for each of them individually. Like, I could see where Rafiq was going to go, and I could see where Ian was going to go. And what made me so excited was, frankly, I was pretty selfish about it, to be honest. I saw that if we stuck together, like all of these potentials would multiply, and I feel like they have. And so it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but yes, from the start of our creation, of our collaboration as a band, we've all kind of done multiple things, but our trajectory has been that more and more each of us can take on more responsibilities and share production and and songwriting and all the ins and outs from the macro to the micro, and it's like, I think one of the reasons why it's really exciting to be in this family, because
it's your gang, isn't it? It's always good to be in a gang.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was all this in Indiana, or did you meet other places? Where are you guys from?
We all lived in Brooklyn at one point in time, but Rafiq's the only one left there now.
It's not a bad place to be.
No, it's not at all. I'm in Dallas, Texas right now, and Ryan's
I'm in LA.
So how did you all meet then? What was the genesis of that?
It's actually a pretty funny story that involves a pizza place and Facebook. But basically, Rafiq and I met. Rafiq was sort of the connective tissue. So Rafiq had reached out to Ryan at one point, trying to put a show together, which didn't end up working out. But Ryan listened to Rafiq's music and felt drawn to it, and so they started working together on different recording projects that Ryan was doing, both Son Lux stuff and some film score that Ryan was doing and other things. And then Rafiq and I met because I was like the substitute drummer in a band that Rafiq was playing with, and basically we played that show together. And then I was on tour with different bands. I didn't see Rafiq for a while, but we definitely felt a kinship even in that short amount of time that we spent together. And then years later, when Ryan was kind of in touch with Rafiq and Ryan was looking to form a band to perform his music from the third album that he mentioned, Lanterns, which is one of those records that he made not thinking about how to play live at all, and is pretty maximal in a lot of ways, and one could say is impossible to play live, or not obvious how one would do it. So Ryan was looking for other musicians, and Rafiq was kind of tapped into the community in New York in such a way that he was kind of trying to find a drummer. And basically, we hadn't talked in a long time, so I didn't come to mind immediately. But because I liked a post that he put on Facebook about this legendary pizza place in Brooklyn, he was like, "Oh yeah, that guy would be great."
Indeed he would be, and indeed he was.
So it's a funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you think about the small things that change the course of your life. I mean,
that's one of those odd ones.
A click on the Facebook post, it's just. I mean, I have to think, at some point, destiny would have us together, one way or the other. If it wasn't one thing, it would have been the next. But I don't know. You never know.
You never know. It could have went another way, a good way, a bad way, anyway. But it's faith in the randomness of the universe. How anything can just happen at any moment, and the whole trajectory of your life can change forever. I mean, history's littered with it. So when you go with friends, for better and for worse, they take the wrong turn, as they'd say, or you take the right turn. I tend to believe a certain amount in destiny, but also I think the willingness to kind of be on the lookout. You know, you kind of have a sixth sense about who's good for you. And if you've got that kind of positive mindset and you just go, you know what, this has a chance. You know.
And I think the three of us have all been very good for one another in a lot of ways. And I think we kind of felt that pretty much immediately. It's
important that, though, isn't it, the dynamic between people and that faces fit and that just the day-to-day business of being in music together. You've got to get along.
Especially like on the road.
Yep.
We all have separate limos and separate private jets.
The thing that I always say is that when on tour, the only times that you're alone is like when you're taking a shower or taking a shit.
So going back to kind of your creative process. So, I mean, I've kind of done some of my due diligence on this, and especially when you started out, Ryan, you were kind of making records in the traditional way. So, and you found that quite frustrating, you know, being sort of the traditional way of making records wasn't really working for you. So you decided to kind of, I think when you really discovered that the studio was like a creative instrument, I
think that's a mischaracterization of my evolution. I think early evolution. I felt really confined by the sort of the assumptions I was making as a music student, as a student of music. I was, I grew up studying Western classical music and the piano and composition, and fortunately also began to study jazz by the time I got into high school. But then I went off to music school. Again, it was a real traditional school, it was a great school, but I had trouble reconciling who I was becoming as a music maker and who I was as a listener. And I was in the process of discovering so many amazing things with music, but I couldn't, and I truly loved them, but I didn't see myself, I couldn't see myself in at the end of any given path that I could see. And one of the reasons that Son Lux became a thing was that I was trying to figure out a way to reconcile what seemed like, I felt very split personality as a musician. But I thought, I had a hunch that there were a lot of things that fascinated me about music that I didn't have to go to multiple places. I didn't have to scratch all these itches in very different ways. I could find a way through my own music to basically create what I wish I could hear. And I think that's what I did. I think the first Son Lux record really represents me running with a concept and winnowing out a kind of aesthetic that I feel is still a strong aspect of Son Lux. But I don't think but I didn't know that I was making a record at first. I'd really just thought I was, because I didn't see myself, even at the start, I didn't see myself, I wasn't a singer. I didn't have, Son Lux was just a name I used because I didn't want to tether my personal name to any given project. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know where it would go. And so, so I didn't, so from day one, making a record was just an experiment. And I never really felt like I had to do it the way it's done. So, and still, the way we make records is, Tuesday is different than Wednesday, is different than Thursday, is different than Friday, and that's how we like it. We're always trying to experiment and trying to discover new ways to think and to do. I had come up with a bunch of random names, and that was just the one that my wife Jennifer liked the best. So she kind of hated all the other ones. So I actually came to discover, after I had sort of settled on it, ways in which I really liked it, and it worked well. I don't think there was a lot of, like, I wasn't really cerebral about it. Other than I did like the idea of having 2 words instead of one for an artist name or band name, and I liked the idea of pairing. That it has contrast. It pairs a word from a dead language that lux, and that has its own traditions, and it has its own mythology, and then pairing that with a word that means something different in different languages and is open to interpretation. And there's something like kind of wonderful about that contrast to me. And later realized that, Son Lux, it's like in French, you could say it's like luxurious sound, or I thought about it afterward that son is, sun and sun are lomophones, and you can, you could technically get sunlight out of it, which is cool, out of the name.
We had Son House, great blues singer.
Yeah, I mean, and
John the Revelator.
Also a tradition of the word sun, Also recognizing, Sun also recognizes, at the time, because it was a solo project, recognizing that I had a particular, that I was part of what I'm indebted to what comes before me, and I felt like that something about sun and the concept of sun it acknowledges that you are indebted to what comes before you. Yeah.
You mentioned your wife there. You were scoring. Your wife's a dancer, and you were scoring for dance.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fate. If you hadn't met your wife, maybe, because that obviously segued its way into
Yeah,
film.
I mean, dance was a super, and it still is a really important part of my creative life. And early on, some of the earliest Son Lux songs, including the very first one, began as pieces for dance. So. And
sort of how did the evolution of that move into film? I mean, obviously you got a
film,
taste for it, and from doing that. And so, what was the first break that happened in film?
That's a good question. Would you say Looper was maybe kind of? I know you.
I was
the composer, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I had a buddy, still a dear friend of mine. His name is Nathan Johnson, and his cousin is the filmmaker Rian Johnson. And Nathan has done all of Ryan's movies except for Star Wars. And Nathan welcomed me into the process of 3 of his films, one of which I worked on really extensively, a film called Looper with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis. And I think that's where I realized that film could be an amazing place to experiment. And I'd never really thought about the creative potential, to just like invent worlds, and how film is a perfect, can create a perfect opportunity for that. So my first break though as a composer was when a filmmaker, Ned Benson, who is a writer and a director that I actually just finished a new project with. But for his first film, it was called The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby. He had enlisted Anthony Gonzalez, who's M83, to score his movie. But because the production, and this happens all the time in film, because the production was getting delayed, ultimately he had to bow out. Anthony had to bow out.
They're playing here next week, M83 at
the
Film Festival. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Looking forward to it.
So he and it's on his recommendation. Someone had mentioned Son Lux, and he kindly got behind that idea as well. And and I think that it gave Ned the sort of like assurance that he needed to give me a go. And so we did that film together, and that was my first time scoring my own film.
It's a big difference, though, isn't it, when you're making your own records and scoring for film? You got those cues, you better get them right.
Yeah.
And there's no messing about. You know, they're very strict about it. So you have to kind of create a whole new set of disciplines. You can't just go out on a random tangent. It's like it's got to fit. So was that challenging at the beginning? Or did you just take to that quite easily?
Yeah, but I was already kind of used to that with, I was doing a lot of scoring ads because I was I worked at a music house and as an in-house composer, just cranking out tons and tons of, I actually found film to be a cool way that I could dip into a world and then dip out of it, but stay in there long enough to really develop something, like to really soak in it, you know. Son Lux is like kind of like the opportunity for us to bring whatever we want to the project. You know, it's like it's an open door to any and all ideas, and I think the three of us we vet them together and we welcome each other's ideas as our own. Now, when it comes to film, you're creating music and serve, like you said, there's different disciplines at play. And maybe there's a more limited set of ideas that will work for the film. But in a way that's like, I kind of think of it more of like, maybe film scoring is like more like making a concept record where there's a world of opportunity to do so many things, but they're all guided by like maybe a single concept.
It does often catalyze one to do things that you didn't think you would do before.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, but hopefully more for better than for worse. And definitely is a way to kind of, I think when we worked on Everything Everywhere All at Once, there was we surprised ourselves a lot with what came out, you know.
Do you think making films, like making music for films, changed the way you make your own albums? Because I've noticed from the very early Son Lux records to, say, the later ones have a lot more space in them. There's not so much going on in a good way, you know, sort of, not that I don't like the early ones,
I
but,
agree.
you know, you evolved into kind of where you do that with film. You know, it's not so busy, and because, you have to get the emotional impact of the scene right. And I mean, I find that personally very attractive, that kind of attention to detail of the space and how you're sitting in the space as a listener. Like I was telling you my silly story this morning, but, you know, where music becomes part of your day, part of your experience of the day. It's like a soundtrack, but it's not invasive. Like, funny enough, today, I was listening to some music on my phone, on my iPhone, and then like some randomly like Apple Music started playing this really terrible music, and I felt invaded. I felt like just smashing. How dare they? You know, they're attacking my day. I didn't want that.
It's like a stranger coming into your home with an axe or something.
What is that? It just sort of, I was trying to knock it off, like trying to knock this off, you know. But I found with your music, yeah, definitely, as you've kind of grown as a band, as a collaborative or whatever phrase you want to use for you guys, you're using more space. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that in parallel with us actually working on films, because we were talking about film a lot in the early days of making that last 3-volume record. And it was even before we were approached about scoring one together, because before Everything Everywhere, Ryan had done a few film projects, but the three of us had never made one together as a band. But when we were embarking on that season of work that became 3 LPs, the Tomorrow's trilogy, that last set of albums that we put out, you know, we were going through like all of these early ideas. I remember Ian and I came to LA and we like all gathered in Ryan's space at the time, and we were listening through all these early kind of fragments, thinking that maybe out of 35 or 36 things, we would whittle it down to a respectable like 8 to 10 things and kind of focus in on what would become the next record. And we didn't want to not pursue any of the directions, like all of them were calling out to us. And I think we realized at that point that we were in this, like what we refer to as like a season of sitting in a certain headspace musically. And that was sort of, as we were trying to negotiate like what to do with that, like, because we were like, wow, this is going to be a lot of music. How do we feel about this? How should it come out? Do we put these things together in smaller parcels? Do we make, full-length things? What is this? And one of the things that we kept coming back to was like, albums, especially in this day and age, so often are like kind of packed into this tight space where it's like bangers, like you're just like every song's gotta grip and hit and be the biggest thing. And a great film,
and being super engaging super quickly.
Yeah, like all the time, just like demanding so much of you. And whereas a great film like builds around a few key moments, like it's like there's headroom that is being explored between stillness and intensity, and like that experience, that like sort of strapping in and like sitting in a longer term kind of way with something that may like push you in directions that are at times uncomfortable or at times challenging, or like all of these things that need more of our space. Like that's why like being in this room with all of these devices that were designed to transmit music that was digested in this longer form sort of way, like you see that like there was a time at which people really valued the experience of like sitting with the music, and that in and of itself could be like,
patience.
Yeah. And it's like, it would though be invasive in a different kind of way, because it's like, it's a thing that you do actively. You know what I mean? Like, I think music has become something that like, now the speakers don't look like this partly because they're designed to blend in with our environment. Like music has become such a sort of like accompaniment in our lives, and I'm not, like universally poo-pooing that, because I think that there are good things that have come from that too, but the experience of music, like feeling like its own film, is something that we all really love, like that active kind of engagement with it. And I think that's like sort of a dynamic that was inspiring us before we actually like even set forth trying to make music for film.
Yeah, because it's kind of, I wager to say, this might be controversial, but I sometimes find American movies have too much music. There's too much music.
I agree.
And it's like, we don't need to be told how to feel about everything. We can work that out for ourselves.
Yeah.
And this, watching New Wave film, or even, so they know how to be quiet. Just leave that bit. We don't need the violins coming in, the sad bit. We know it's the sad bit, I find that sometimes challenging watching American movies. Like, I find it's kind of belittling the audience.
And also the timing of, because like there's a difference between like, oh, it's sad violins, what's about to happen is going to be really sad, versus like being like, oh shit, this is sad, and then the violins come in and you're like, oh, sometimes like people, like there's definitely a thing about like giving things away too early. It like helps the listener not have to like really, or the viewer not have to like really like engage.
And also like music is not the only source of sound that can be like very intentional and sculptural inside of a film. Like one of my favorite directors right now is this Thai filmmaker, Apichatpong Wilasetakun.
Sure.
And I actually got to work with him last year on something, and his process is so like, there's like almost no music in his films, but there's such an intentional use of environmental sound, like almost like it's score or sound design. Like he's just able to make the environment speak in a way that underscores the story, you know, and like if you have music all over everything, you don't have room for that. You know, like there's so much that can be said by just treating everything that's already there very intentionally, you know, and then what more is needed, if anything, can come.
It's understated,
that,
you know.
But that being said, we did score a film that had 2 hours of music in it. But it kind of demanded it, and it was just the way that that the Daniels, the directors of that movie.
That's Danielkwan, is it?
Danielkwan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just getting back to that, so it's Everything Everywhere All at Once. Huge movie now, massively critically acclaimed, which you guys brilliantly scored. I mean, for me, it felt a little bit like sort of, you know, fantasy, like sort of Kill Bill.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
You know, but, you know,
like
which I loved
epic
Kill Bill. A lot of people, I don't know, didn't dig that movie, but I love that movie. And I thought, again, you know, he got the music right on that, you know, and this kind of, I mean, he uses a lot of, obviously, pre-existing tracks, which a lot of people are doing these days. Like there's a brilliant English director called Shane Meadows. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's just done a recent series called The Gallows Pole. He's a kind of alternative British director.
Shane Meadows?
Yeah, Shane Meadows. And he's just done a series recently, and I think he uses a band called Goat, and it's fantastic. But I think what's starting to happen now, even in film, is I don't know if they're trying to be a little cheap by but they're using tracks and then using the stems. You know what I mean? Like they used to use in production music, they still use, you know.
That's not a cheaper. That's not a cheaper approach, actually.
Well, it depends, I guess, on who you're getting licensing the music from.
But they're kind of like Scorsese does it a lot, you know.
And I think that's cool. I mean, that we did that on Everything Everywhere All at Once. The original plan was actually to do that extensively. The original plan,
like Son Lux songs.
A lot of songs, Son Lux songs, a lot of rafiqbhatia solo stuff, a lot of ianchang solo stuff, and a lot of ryanlott solo stuff, because we also all have our own solo projects. And that was one of the things that really drew the Daniels to us, is they saw us as a multiverse band, you know. Like,
so using pieces
there was us as a collective, and then there was us individually, and they knew there was going to be a lot of music, so the idea was, let's find Rafiq tracks, Ian tracks, Ryan tracks, Son Lux tracks, and place them in the movie. If we hire these guys, they can do bespoke score, and then they can do custom versions of their songs for us. And, you know, when we first were engaged in the film, it was in July of 2019, which is, you know, to be involved in a project so early. We actually found out the day before the Oscars that we were the film's first hire.
Wow.
Which is like really unheard of. So we had a period of time with the Daniels where we were dreaming up how it was going to go down. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. When the pandemic hit, you know, basically the entire post-production process was protracted. There was no horizon anymore. And so so many places in the film where we might have found a solution with the stems of existing work, the movie kept calling out to us to go bespoke. And with only a few exceptions, that's exactly what happened. Is we just created a whole score from scratch, and even the licensed material where we did engage some of our stems.
Like remade them.
Basically. We remade them from the ground up anyway. One song we actually generated an entirely new master for, entirely new version is a song from our first record together as a band called Your Day Will Come, and for that one, the Daniels had found a home for it in a really special place in the film, and it worked so well. But we couldn't help ourselves, and like, no, let's not just use it as it is. Like, let's make this truly this movie's own version of the song. And so, yeah.
Did you do any immersive sort of mixes? Any Dolby Atmos mixes?
Yeah, it was an Atmos mix.
But actually, weirdly, we didn't engage the Atmos stuff with music that much. I think there was a lot more Atmos sound design. than music. There were like a few key moments where we picked it. I remember we talked to Daniels about it, and they, on their first film, there's a really crazy movie called Swiss Army Man, which features Daniel Radcliffe as a farting corpse. They like went really crazy with like Dolby Atmos and like the music, and like had things swirling around the ceiling, or you know, whatever. But like the way it folds down, they basically learned that it's like you don't want to go too overboard with that stuff.
Yeah, I think we like went very conservative after how crazy it had been last time around.
And the movie's crazy enough. So.
It is, but ultimately it's a movie about relationships. And, you know, and parallel universes. Even the way I was just thinking about it today, the sort of, you know, everybody's got their own narrative. You know, so and they're working in parallel. You've got a whole different way of thinking about a process of events, and really you know, especially the trauma between parents and children, and you know, I mean, so in that way, it's going to be got all the other stuff going on, but really, that's a lot of the core message of the of the tune. Which at the end of the day, we're going to talk today. I thought, well, here's three chaps that, you know, I'd like to sort of hear their view on how AI is going to get used in music moving forward. Because it's terrifying. I listened to the Joe Rogan, Elon Musk thing where they're like, you know, it's the Terminator's coming, you know, knocking on your door any day soon. It's like we're all going to die. But I mean, music has always used new technology, you know, and it's been poo-pooed a lot of the time. Like when it starts, sequencers came out. Oh my God, what are they doing? And
it's gonna take my job.
You know, Cubase. Oh my God, you know.
Cubase.
Remember Cubase back in the day on the Atari 1040? Had it myself. And then but AI, you know, I think personally, I think there's huge opportunities for AI moving. Have you guys given it any thought about how you would incorporate it into you guys as a trio moving forward?
I think we haven't talked about like incorporating it into our process yet, really.
Some of our
technically, one of the tools that I use very often is like made using AI. So that's the other thing, is like AI is a powerful thing that people who are like making virtual instruments or making kind of like platforms or tools for making music are using in really interesting ways. So there's like these like AI based products. And the tool that I'm talking about is called sensory percussion, which is like a machine learning thing that can basically turn like a drum into like a very powerful sampler. But yeah, in terms of like being like, you know, asking, like kind of giving data to AI and having it spit something back out and like using that to make, like, we haven't really talked about like using it in that way. And I think in general, like with AI and music, I think it's wrong to say that it's like all good or that it's all bad. Like I think it's one of those technologies that's going to be so like, it's going to change so much that it's kind of going to be all those things. There's going to be some good things, there's going to be some bad things, and
it's kind of the Wild West, isn't it, at the moment? About how it's going to play out, where you would just literally tell the computer what you want, or kind of
but there is like, for example, with movie scoring, like one thing that we've all talked about, like definitely being able to see happen, which is not great, is like basically all the studios, you know, as they own the music that's in their archives and their shows and everything, so they all have massive data libraries basically. And like what will happen is, instead of like having like a composer score a TV show or whatever, like they could easily just be like, oh yeah, just like a romantic strings thing here, and like a thing, you know, and then it'll just kind of like spit out like pretty general like things that like will work with the picture. And I think that's definitely probably something that we're going to be seeing in the future.
I think that's for sure. I mean, let's be honest though. I mean, we've all done production music over the years, and you get a brief and you start digging around, listening to different things. What's the difference between you doing it and a computer doing it? I mean, being fair about it in that respect, it's like for the ownership, you say, oh, well, you know, it's other people's work and you can't they can't use other people's work as influence, but we do as composers. You listen to, you want something a bit Rolling Stones-ish with a bit of Beatles. You listen to the Beatles, you listen to the Rolling Stones, you listen to a lot of other
Especially in
records.
film music, this is like how it works. It's like, here's the temp, like follow the temp, like that's like part of like.
And there's only so many melodic sequences of notes, so it's going to be a tricky time. I was thinking the other day, even with AI, someone's going to invent something that's, like all these sort of suits that are going on, you're using my tune suits. It's like someone's going to invent a piece of software, like, because everything's a bit like everything, trying to find ways of closing down artists. That's where I think it could all get stupid. Really,
I think what's going to happen practically is something like ChatGPT will exist really soon, I think, for scoring. As Ian pointed out, the studios are sitting on mountains of data that they can feed their respective AI technologies to emulate and to crank out options. And I think that's what's going to happen probably first is essentially you'll have AI scoring, and then you'll have someone like an editor that vets the decisions and where they don't work and where they do. There'll still be a human component for a while, I think, to sort of finalize the thing in the way that you can ask ChatGPT to like
draft a speech that you have to make.
Yeah, and then you go through it, and then you can you can
wrong.
personalize it. And so I think there'll be, but those are just people that again, the studios will just have on a salary, and they just clock in and they watch a scene, and they receive the score from the machine, and then fix something that needs to be fixed, and then send it on to the director.
Well, I suppose you can look at it like, vinyl, for instance. Who would have ever thought that vinyl would come back? And it was
I
like
think
in the
that's
same way
different,
that,
though. I think vinyl is an artifact. It's what we're sitting in here now. We're celebrating with sentimentality and with awe. We're celebrating these accomplishments of technology from the past, not because they're better technology than we have now. And I think vinyl is an example. It's because these things are better in so many other ways. If not technologically, they're certainly basically in every other way they're more magnificent. I think that vinyl is like an example of a way in which we, due to the way in which we value the experience we have of music, that feels like you can't quite put your finger on why do we love music so much? Why does it feel so intrinsically tied to our human experience? And why does it tangle itself up into our experiences in the way it does? Having the, I think vinyl and its resurgence in a lot of ways is a response to quickly losing anything that we can put our literal fingers on.
Yeah.
tangible.
And I think it's a sort of sentimentality. It's a movement of sentimentality, and I don't think it's really it's not an audiophile movement. That's not really what it is. Yeah.
It makes me wonder if like someday, like with the way AI, like, fast forward 20 years, 30 years or something, like I wonder if it'll be the type of thing where it's just like, oh my God, is that person like actually playing an instrument?
Yeah.
I'm looking this person in the eye and they're doing this stuff.
I think that a lot, like, as because I have a 6-year-old, and like I'm trying to think of ways in which he can, I can create inroads to music for him, experiencing music, like as a listener, but also as a maker. And one of the things that I'm using right now is with him is like these little apps where he can sequence his own samples. And he's 6, and it's an iPad or an iPhone or something, and it's so powerful. And part of one half of my brain, I'm thinking, oh, this is amazing. You know, he's learning the joy of creating sound and arranging it, composing it. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, if I'm honest with myself, like, do I think that would have been good for me if I was? I don't know. I don't know that it would have been. I mean, I feel like, you know, I was essentially forced to, you know, study the piano. I hated it and hated it and hated it and hated it. But it's, I think, one of the best things my parents did for me is not let me quit it. And I feel like that was a path. It was my path. It doesn't mean it has to be his path. But I'm so thankful that I developed a facility on a physical instrument that I can, you know, that is a portal for my imagination in a way that I'm not, you know, it is in a different way. And I'm really divided about it, you know, really divided about it.
So having a family, have you guys got families or as in children?
No children, but we're both married. Yeah.
So, well, even being married and having children, has that changed your relationship with music, having a family?
It has a little bit for me.
Yeah, I think in practical ways,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
like,
just,
and
you know, when it's just you, like,
that is just music. Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's good. Get our fucking heads out of our asses, you know.
They focus you.
Yeah, I think all three of us were. I'll use were the type of people who just had a difficult time having any type of well-roundedness in our lives. So I would say even just getting married, I don't even have a kid. Like it's had a positive impact in some ways, and definitely, you know, there are times where I'm just like, oh, like I wish I was like spending more time on music, but like it's like that's not all that life is about. You know, I don't know.
Well, listening to your music and I mean this in the nicest possible way. I mean, you need to be patient with it. Mm-hmm. You know, and the thing that I find now listening to a lot of music is just no patience. I don't want to be like some old fuddy-duddy, you know, knocking the kids today, you know, listening to, because, you know, playlists and just jumping after 20 seconds where like the songs are written, get to the chorus as quickly as possible, cut out intros. Yeah. I mean, it horrifies me personally, but as a listener, but your music, you need to be patient, and in the kind of era as a band of like where that's just, you know, a lot of it, especially young listeners don't seem to have the patience to properly sit down and absorb a whole piece of work. Because, I mean, from what I've read and doing my research, it's like, you know, the format of an album is too short for you guys in lots of ways. You need to extend that. And I understand that. I mean, it's like, you know, because I will listen to records over and over again. Mm-hmm. I would rather have an extended emotional journey rather than just the one record. Mm-hmm. I mean, in a way, it's an old concept, like concept records. You know, back in the day, people did do it, and you had a jazz background as well, you know, jazz improvising. You know, so you're kind of being the new era of bringing that forward in a kind of a new way. Is that fair to say? Is that part of the mindset of the band?
I don't know if it's like ever been a goal. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I don't know that we're really setting out to do that specifically, but I think we are very indebted to a lot of musicians and all different kinds of music who did that. Mm-hmm. And that's what we love, and that's what we're coming out of. So I think it's as simple as that in a lot of ways. Like, our experience of how transformative the patient listening experience can be, you know, like how much more rewarding that has been for us is the reason why we make music like that, probably.
Because I was thinking also today that, like, because of the kind of soundscapes, these fantastic soundscapes that you make as a band, that I really love, and I think it transcends you. But I thought, if these guys, like, if major labels like got a hold of them and could just get them to condense it a bit, you'd be working with some of the biggest artists in the world. You know what I mean? You're like, let's get this down to 3 minutes. Those guys have got the angle, they've got the sound, but it's too long. You know, we need it all down to like
it's funny.
2 minutes.
It's funny you say that because, I mean, we there was a point in our life as a band where like that maybe we could have sprung to be trying to do that more.
Yeah.
Glass Note and everything, you know, like, but like, I think that our manager actually put it best. Like, our most successful song as a band is actually our most successful song. Son Lux's most successful song is something that Ryan did on his own called Easy. And our manager put it best, which he was just like, yeah, like that was an accident almost. Like, it's like, if you're going to make a song that's like going to hit that many nerves, like it's like as the three of us and the values that we have, like it's not going to totally be on purpose, because we have been put on the spot by a label and things like that to be like, oh, like, you know, we've had the thing where it's like, oh, love the album, you know, the soundscape's amazing, blah, 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 but we need a single, you know what I mean? And like, we've like done that, and like, you know, it didn't necessarily...
That song was not the most popular song on the album.
On that album,
Yeah.
and we discovered that wasn't like, you know, I think writing like a perfect pop song that's gonna like just like everyone's gonna be singing after they hear, like there's an art to that, and there's like a science to it even that like, but like that's not what we're obsessed with. So like it's just kind of like a difficult thing that we had to accept about ourselves, and I'm perfectly.
I mean, I will say that, you know, when the Daniels contacted us before they hired any of the actors to make their film, it wasn't because we had scored movies together, and they didn't even know that I had scored movies on my own when they first reached out. They reached out because they loved our music. They loved who we were as individuals and who we were as a band musically. And it was pursuing what we want to do musically that got us that gig. And that gig was scoring what is now the most awarded film in history. It won Best Picture. It won, you know, it's like all these different things and all these accolades. And I also think that accolades aside, it's something that you know, was and will continue to be a cultural event and a touchstone for a lot of for a lot of young filmmakers. And I do believe it represents a pivot in filmmaking. I believe it creates a lot of open. I think it blows off a lot of the assumed barriers to. You know, for a lot of folks, you know, in making not just film, but in just making art. And I think, you know, I'm so glad that we were who we were.
Chosen to be honest to ourselves.
To do what we wanted to do. And I'm so glad that Rafiq was making his solo music, and Ian was making his solo music, and I was making my solo music, and we were making all this music as a band. And each of us in our own ways and collectively were doing exactly what we wanted to do. Not what someone else was telling us to do in order to, you know, sell records.
Yeah, because at one point, like, an unnamed label executive, like, basically asked us a trick question, which was like, don't you want your music to reach as many people as possible? But what we quickly realized is like, well, at what cost? Like, if we're not actually...
Well, whose music, first of all?
Right.
Is it really our music?
Yeah, and it's like, if we're not engaging with this music that like in a way that's true to ourselves, like, I don't know. It's a trick question, because it's like the first thing you want to say is like, yes, like as many people as possible, like of course. But like, it's like, but you know, asterisk, as many people as possible, while still like just like doing exactly like why we started making music in the first place and all that stuff.
Well, you want people to sort of emotionally connect with your music, and it's random, isn't it? It's just you hope they do, you know.
I mean, I think there's definitely like, you know, as these guys were mentioning, like there is some science involved in like being able to understand, you know, like it's rooted in things that we share in common in terms of human perception. Mm-hmm. But if you're gonna unlock that door, why just do it in service of replicating someone else's formula? Like, why not just really open the door and be like, oh, well, like, what happens if we like explore like the deep-seated primordial feelings that you get when there's something warning you of danger? Or why don't we explore like the way that you know, like your body turns cold when like you can tell that like the birds outside are going silent, there's an incoming storm. You know, like why don't we like go all the way there?
Yeah.
You know, and I think like that's the kind of thing where like that's stuff that you get to explore when you're willing to set aside this idea that like the end goal is like the maximum number of people coming along with you as a, you know, because there's also the question of depth and how deeply you can impact the people who do come along for the ride. I have a friend now who he's like a really amazing fashion designer, creative director. He runs a label out of Atlanta called Factors, and he like was telling me about this thing that he saw in a like old Campari ad campaign that was like 9 out of every 10,000 people like Campari, you know, like they were sort of saying like, you know, like it was like 9 out of every 10,000, you know, like so it's like it like starts out making you think that they're trying to say that it's everyone like everyone likes it, and then you realize that what they're actually saying is like nobody likes it, but that's why you should like it. Yeah, like that it's like that it is kind of like if you get it, it's your thing. Yeah, you know,
that's right.
And
I think Son Lux is very much like that.
Yeah, but it's also like, you know, I think all three of us have been around enough. Like, I think we've been lucky enough to have our relationship to music and it becoming like how we, you know, make our way through the world, and like the fortune that we have to get up and do the thing that we love. Like we've seen along the way what happens when that happens too quickly, or that happens in a way where you like shoot to some level of success that you don't understand, and then you're stuck trying to replicate it, or when you're so well known and beloved that like your celebrity keeps you from like being able to like be there for your family or your friends or just be a normal person, or like, you know, like there's like so many things like that like
but it must be difficult like for you guys now that you've had such, well, difficult maybe is not the right word, challenging. You've had this huge success and like show business. It's like the doors are going to be opening up, getting all these different offers, and these things take a long time, don't they? You know,
our most successful endeavor was also our weirdest. I mean, like that movie was profoundly weird.
We're very lucky.
We're so lucky, and I feel, you know, and again, that opportunity only arose because we were just doing our thing, like nose to the ground, you know, getting out around the world where they'll have us play our asses off as well as we can play live, to make music and to continually remake it on the stage and in the studio.
I mean, that movie is totally like the same thing as what Michael said about Easy being an accident. Like, who would have ever thought reading the script?
That's a great point.
It was going to be what it is. Like, Ryan literally was texting us when we got the script for this movie, being like, I think there's something wrong with my PDF. Like, the pages are out of order.
Seriously, I was like, there's no way that this is how they want it to go. Because, you know.
But also the other thing, like, it's not, I'm happy, like, as like a big success as a film composer is very different than being like a big success as a pop star. Like we can easily just kind of like walk around and no one, you know what I mean? It's like we can still have normal life. Like it's actually like a very wonderful position to be in because, you know, like you said, offers are coming in, like we'll be able to kind of be very intentional about what kind of opportunities we take instead of like having a scarcity mindset. Like, you know, all three of us have had at some point in our lives, you know, feeling like we have to take a gig just because it's coming along. So we're in a very like wonderful position where like we're getting good projects, but we also don't have to like kind of I don't know, like film, like I don't even have to like feel pressured to like post on social media all the time or whatever. It's like it's nice. Like I can just like work on a soundtrack or whatever, and then we can also still, it enables us to also just like make our own music and
play it live, which obviously you've got a gig tomorrow night, and so the whole experience of live music. I mean, you can't really. It's very difficult to explain to people how that is emotionally, to be able to go out and to play to people in real time. That's a whole other experience. And to be honest, I was listening to your voice quite a lot from the very early days to the later days, and I found, at the early days it's very androgynous. You know, I didn't even know it was a girl, it was a guy.
We always like to say it's a mix between like a little girl and an old grandpa.
That's pretty close, actually. But what I did notice is that, and this is only from my experience as a producer, that you know, when you work with artists who worked a lot from, say, home studios, is like they're working a lot at home, singing very quietly because they don't want the neighbors to hear them. So they end up using a lot of falsetto.
Yeah, I was just in my attic in Cleveland, and again, I hadn't, you know, when I was developing the Son Lux project, that first record, I wasn't supposed to be the singer. I knew there was going to be vocal songs, or I was hoping there were, but it was just people I was going to find on MySpace. You know, that was the original plan. It was that long ago. But I was having vocal ideas, and so I would quietly sing them into a microphone, and then I was just encouraged to keep going.
As you play live, though, I think it's getting behind the mic and being able to push a lot harder, and your voice has kind of grown, you know, in that way, in its delivery, which is so that kind of changes the whole perspective of the tunes, you know, where there's a kind of more of it. I wouldn't use the word rage, but there is definitely another
broader
element,
vocabulary.
That's come into the template, you know, that's made the thing grow and feel a little.
That's true of all of us.
And you can really hear that. Like the first record we made as a trio came off the back of like a lot of touring, and Ryan had kind of discovered a lot of things about his voice, and we discovered things like Bones. That record, the first one is like, it's just so packed with ideas, and you're like singing like much harder. And then I think since then we've kind of like that was like sort of like the explosion, you know? It's like, oh, like this is like a really great like partnership and collaboration of the three of us, like so many ideas, so much, like just put it all in there. And then since there, things have kind of tapered, and we've like finessed and like kind of challenged ourselves in restraint and in different ways. But it's cool to even like reflect on that, and like it's captured like our journey as three human beings is like captured in this way, like song.
So just speaking on that, moving forward into the next part of your journey, what's the plan?
There's a lot going on right now.
A lot of decisions to be made.
Yes, a lot of decisions to be made. More film scoring. Rafiq is working on some solo material that is amazing. And we're also, we're talking about kind of every time we kind of in between cycles, so to speak, or seasons as a band, we try to like talk about like how we can do things differently that feel like an interest, like try to chart a course that's going to be one in which we can grow into. So I think I know one thing we're talking a lot about is like harnessing the power of improvisation more than we have, and in a deeper way than we have before.
Yes.
And
in the studio?
In the studio,
Yeah. And I think that's going to go like hand in hand with, you know, we're not going to be able to tour as much as we have historically. And I know, speaking for myself, like I want to take, you know, as much as I love being in front of people and playing live and stuff, maybe this makes me sound like a dick, but I feel like the majority of the enjoyment I get playing live is actually just like the thrill of making music, what is happening on stage and the way that music is lighting up and feeling, you know, so like if there's, you know, 5,000 people in the audience or 5 people in the audience, you can like it can still feel that way. And I don't want to, as we taper like our touring or reduce the amount of touring we can do, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
And I think what it gives us is an opportunity to channel that energy actually more into our recordings than we ever have. It's an excuse to do it, at least.
And then I think we're hoping that out of that can become something where the live performances that we do, like, have around whatever the next recordings are things that can really be like each performance is very special, and something that like is experienced in the room together and is like not like musically not the same night to night, like in a pretty radical way. But we'll see what happens.
I mean, I think the last thing I'll say about that is like we are very proud of how we've played live historically, but we also have played into a kind of like model that exists where you make a record and then you go on tour and it's like you're playing in the clubs that the promoters,
Sure.
have relationships with, and it's this whole machine that is like has in many ways like amplified our reach and like helped us connect with our audience, and there's a lot to be thankful for about it. But there's also like things that we want to do and explore that are not the typical thing that you do when you play live,
Yeah.
And they require more forethought, and they're more immersive, and they're more like of a special experiential kind of thing. And so that's something that we're also kind of engaging with. Is like,
I empathize with what you say there about, because even myself as a performer, in my career, I've always thought you play first for your guys on the stage. You interact with them, and then if the audience like it, and the wave goes back and forward, and that's great. But ultimately, you're playing for your mates, your guys on the stage. Those guys that you created those songs. You're looking at each other. You're communicating. I always feel a little sad when I see bands when they're not doing that anymore, when they're too jaded and they're just up there going through the motions. But I think there is I know that's pretty standard, but there is a magic of playing live.
Yeah,
totally.
There's no other way you can get it.
No other way you can get it.
I think it is getting lost in a lot of situations now, especially the way that like a lot of times like an artist will have a musical director who hires a band, and like basically everything's like decided for them what they play, and everyone has like clicks in their ears, and they're really far apart from each other on stage. This is like big pop gig style, you know what I mean? And you're basically like essentially alone. Like you're not actually really.
Yeah.
It's
like,
forensic.
Yeah,
it's
become like a thing that's very precise, but it forensic is a good word. And I think I'm hoping that as like a counterbalance to all this AI stuff that's happening down the road, that there is going to be a craving for like
spontaneity,
improvisation, something that feels like it's just palpably like human connection. I don't know. I'm hoping that
and
is
see
an
what might
aspect of it
happen.
as well.
I mean, we had Judith Hill, who's an American artist here about a month ago. She's great, and she'd worked with Michael Jackson. She actually, I mean, she's cut out of such bad luck. I mean, she got the gig with Michael Jackson, and then like just before the tour, he died and whatever. But she was saying that like Michael Jackson, the whole tour was just so detailed to every last moment. But she also worked with Prince, and it was like, well, let's just see what happens. So they would go out, and it was just like, they would just, nobody knew what song he was even going to do. And then everybody, and it was two completely different experiences, I mean, she sort of leaned more towards the Prince version in the end. It was more fun, more. And I mean, that kind of goes back to jazz, and when people would just decide, hey, let's see what happens tonight. Somebody takes it a different way, and a little bit of spontaneity. I think it's trying to get it away from the control of. This sounds sort of left-wing rhetoric here, but getting away from the big multinational corporations trying to control every moment of your life as an artist and even as a listener.
I mean, you're not wrong.
You got to kick back against that. A little bit of youth rebellion would be good. Hey, come on, we're not going to have that. And there are young people out there kicking back, but
for sure.
I do think this whole corporatization, commercialization of every moment of everything is a little frightening, especially with AI and, even, sort of slightly segueing here, I was watching a thing about face recognition in China, and it was like, where they don't go in with a credit card anymore. They just go in and a camera takes your photograph.
I mean, it's crazy. It's funny you say that, because it was funny you say that. On my flight in Minneapolis.
I had the facial recognition as well.
I didn't, my flight over here just now, I didn't scan my boarding pass.
Oh, wow.
They scanned my face.
Boom. Yeah.
It's just biometric.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like though, like
That's the first time that's ever happened to me. Has that happened to you before? You've had it. Man, I was like watching it, and I was like, nobody's scanning their boarding pass.
JFK has maybe had that for...
yeah, JFK's had it.
Had it for a minute.
in China, they've taken a step forward where they basically they give you like a number system,
Well,
like
you
a
can do that
voucher
at-
system, and so if you do any protesting, it goes on your file.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
even get the bus, you can't get the tram. They can shut your life down.
Yeah, I mean, Whole Foods in the U.S.
like
has
dock
you can pay with your palm, because like if you just put your palm on file with Amazon, it's just like wow.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
I mean, I don't know. It's like,
It's a whole other discussion about how far it goes. But I think people, there are I think all the top scientists in the world, a lot of them in that world have said we need a moratorium on
Yes.
AI.
Yeah,
They need to stop for a minute and just legislate because it's getting out of control. And it's like where even, they're talking about in 10 years' time, it could have some form of consciousness where it can start making autonomous decisions. That's scary, it might just...
Yeah, and that makes it very different than a lot of these other, certainly not analogous to like samplers or something like that. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
a whole
yeah.
other, many orders of magnitude more complex. But I still think that like there is some degree to which like those kinds of existential concerns aside, which are very serious and should be prioritized, but like. On the other hand, there still is some degree to which it's like, okay, there's a very, very, very sharp knife in your kitchen all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And there might be an assassin coming to kill you with it in a few days, but like you also have a fridge full of food and it's not going to make itself. Like, are you going to use the knife or like you going to...
yeah.
I suppose it
AI
depends.
would be pretty fun to mess with for sound dedesign.
Oh, I mean,
there's so
just
many
like so many
that
things.
we could do.
Actually AI is already part of
Yeah.
many tools that we use. He talked about machine learning. It's something you've been using for years, and the technology is only getting better and better. I'm working now with this software called Novum, which is really incredible, and it's a type of,
Is that UAD working?
no, it's like it's some.
I don't know about this.
You sent it to us. It's
Yeah, it's really crazy, and it's this very small company. I think it's like a one-man company. He's just one of these like beautiful nerds that just has come up with some incredible thing, and it more even the concept of like randomization has been an important part of music technology for a long time, which is not intelligence. It is a type of decision making, though, that those of us who use randomization we're choosing not to decide in tiny little ways, and that's an important part of the creative process, introducing chance. And this has been something that's been part of music making and it has different names, but for across the world for forever. It's not a new thing, but giving over those decisions to generate chance based results. It's new that we're using computers to do it. Newer, and it's in the mechanics of so many of our tools software tools that we use. And I think that's the kind of thing those are the kinds of things that make technology intoxicating for me, because what ultimately they're doing is catalyzing
Surprise.
renovations in my own thinking, which hopefully make me better and make me more elastic, so that shit I'm all about,
So
I don't know how fine that line is, though. I don't think anyone knows.
Robot.
I know, yeah. Where is the line in the sand? Fun last thing before we go. If there was an artist, who would you like to collaborate with? Is there an artist out there you'd love to collaborate with as three producers?
Oh man.
I mean, this is a hard question for me because so many of the people who come to mind immediately, like, absolutely do not need our help. Like, you know, like, it's like,
you know,
it's, but just because it would be fun to like I feel like you almost have to orient that question more around like, who would it be fun for us to learn from?
Yeah.
Wadada Leo Smith.
I mean, yeah, I've gotten to spend some time learning from that man, and he is like a sage. Like, he is just like one of the most incredible people. We should do that. I mean,
That's not out of
it's totally not out of
possibility.
Yeah.
would you ever be tempted to sort of do a gig with a big major pop artist for fun?
Yeah.
I think it's.
I mean, I would love to do something with Bjork.
Yeah.
Just gonna put that out into the world.
That's
very, very high on
that
the
answer's been the same for me for decades now.
The other artist I think you'd be great with is FKA Twigs.
Yeah, I think Twigs would be awesome. Yeah,
Her music.
And, Kate Bush, if she decided to come back in again.
yeah.
I mean,
There's so
kind
many of
fun.
those artists that I kind of think had the same kind of process as you guys have moving forward, trying to break molds and do things a bit differently.
The thing that we love is just any artist that is has such an individual approach that you hear a half a second of their music that you know exactly who it is, and Kate is 1,000% like that, and Bjork is 1,000% like that.
Tom York and Johnny Greenwood. I think also.
That's the other act I was going to say you kind of remind me of at times as well, is Radiohead, especially like A Moon-Shaped Pool and Kid A, those records which I loved. I mean, they're my favorite Radiohead records.
Very high.
And we love Portishead too.
Yeah.
Do you know, that's the other thing, we probably, it's like we had Kashin in here doing a gig about 2 weeks ago as part of the whole trip-hop scene, Massive Attack. Because I hear trip-hop in your music as well, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Portishead, Massive Attack, that using soundscape and taking influences from everywhere. Was that part of your musical education?
Huge. I mean, for me, the first record, Son Lux would not. I think probably my primary influences on those first three records were, or that first record, really first
Portishead record? Or Radiohead.
The biggest influences on me when I was creating the first Son Lux record and therefore kind of initiating the project, Portishead, Radiohead, Ciaros, and then
even DJ Shadow, maybe?
No, I never listened to DJ Shadow. There was there's a North African. I can't even find this record anymore. It's a North African oud player and singer named Hamsel Dean, and he had this one record that I absolutely could not stop listening to. I was just and there was something about the minimalism of his instrumentation and his voice that would just come out of nowhere, and it was such a strange voice, and it was to my ear, and I was just haunted by this whole album, start to finish, and it had something similar in it that I was also hearing in Ciaros, which is this kind of this where Ciaros was would have majesty. Hamsel Dean had this kind of spare, but no less transcendent and transporting. I wanted to make music that was transcendent and transporting, and I saw those two things as doing it in very different ways. I also fucking loved beats, especially slow beats. And so Portishead was just everything, just the grit and the grime and just that, the stink and just the, how everything just felt so peculiar and so sludgy and
I had a lot of space.
And then Radiohead was doing all of the things everything else, every other thing was happening with Radiohead, and so like every other way in which I wanted to, like my music to iterate, they were doing a far greater version than I would ever hope to do. And so I think it was like, I think those are, I think 4. And then Björk was one that like her music came shortly after. And then that sort of totally screwed me up, and like in the best way. So
I think it's interesting when you look at music and technology, because it's kind of, we've got more technology, than we've ever had in human history to make music. But really, you don't need more technology, you need more good ideas. It's like, even if you get down to the most basic kind of forms of, say, music, singing-wise, like doo-wop, for instance, it's just voices, but it's amazingly stripped back, but also incredibly complex in the interaction of the harmonies. Yeah. It's like, so you can make music with very little. I'm always saying to people, I just need to get my own studio. No, you need some good ideas, and you need, you don't need a lot to make great music. I think that's...
Yeah, we went on tour. We did a tour in Europe. I don't remember what year this was, but and I managed to get this amazing Geo player, SK Kakraba, who is like from like kind of like legendary Geo lineage. He from
Ghanaian xylophone.
Ghanaian, yeah. And he lives in LA now, and we managed to connect. And he was on that tour with us, opening up, and just the worlds that he would create from that Geo. And it's just 15 notes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like it was very humbling, because like we're up there with like all our shit. You know what I mean? Like just like endless like worlds of sound, and like he would just sit up there like and like just like do the most like incredible like beautiful like that's what you were just saying like reminds me of that.
I mean, one of my favorite songs of all time, funny, talking about Son House, is John the Revelator, that. And it's just him like clapping and singing. And it's I play that track every week. It's just him sort of making a clap kind of stomping thing while he sings. And it's just...
I mean, Odetta, we were just talking about this song the other day, Another Man Done Gone, that recording, just her voice and her clapping.
On that note, I think we should wrap it up. It's been amazing having you here. I'm a huge fan. Just hope everything you do goes on to even wilder success than how can it at the moment? I mean, you're kind of ruling the world of kind of film music.
Thank you so much.
It's all downhill from now, guys.
I'm joking.
No, you've got a wonderful time ahead, I think, and it's going to be amazing and fascinating to see you move forward into the future. I think there's huge things ahead for you guys.
Thank you so much.
And thanks a million for being here. We really appreciate it.
It's been an honor.
Son Lux, thank you so much.
Thank you.